So I'm just going to go over some things in the shell, and as we're going to be working on Module 7, which is working in the shell, we'll look at to give you a refresher on how to read the manual page and how to get used to looking at different command parameters, as well as the idea of files, streams, pipes, and other good things like that. So I'm going to use my Windows subsystem for Linux and actually that I have installed on my Windows machine. There's an article in Blackboard on how to install WSL if you want. It does not ultimately install a desktop interface and make it active, although you can use parts of that, and I'll go into that as we get into Module 11 uh, in week 5. But here is our shell, and I'm inside of a temp folder, and I use the mktemp command to just make a folder, and we'll learn about this in the module. But um, anytime I want to do a particular command, I can actually have my shell interpret that command. So I'm going to go back and I'm going to go into my home folder, right? And so here's my home folder. It's represented by the tilde. And so if I wanted to actually both make a temporary folder and create one, I'm going to check really quickly at my manual page from mktemp, okay, which is how I make a temp folder. So what I would generally do is I would kind of scan that just to remember, get a refresher on, hey, how is it that I need to do this? MKTemp takes some options and then it takes a template. Now, what I can know by the way this manual page works is that when I look at the MKTemp synopsis section and I see these braces, the braces denote that they are optional. And so I can see that there is some default behavior that will happen if I don't include any options after that command. And so what happens is that it creates a temporary file and an or directory. But if I if I don't use any parameters, then I'm going to create a file. And so this actually tells me that I'm going to create a file with read, write, and permissions. And the directories, if I create a directory, it will have a default permissions of read, write, and execute. And so, so if I can look at the options, and what I want to do is, in this case, is create a directory. So I have these. Remember, these are called switches. So I have a short switch or a long one, and I can use either one. In some cases, if I use a certain switch, I have to include some parameters. And so an example of, in this case, using the dash P switch and it has a space dir, it means that if I use this dash P switch, I have to use a directory parameter at the end of it. And then I see the comma there and I have the dash dash tempdir, okay? So this means that if I use the long option that is the same thing as dash P, the long option is dash dash tmpdir. I could do that. And if I specify the directory, I need to use an equal sign and then type that directory out. But that's optional, right? Because it's in braces. So those are the things to think about. If I use this dash dash suffix option above it, then I must use the equal sign and the suffix that's appended to the template. So that just tells me how to read this description. Now, when I go and create my temporary folder, I'm gonna create it as a directory. So I'm gonna use a -D option. Now, the first thing that I want to do, I'm gonna do it this way. I'm gonna CD into that created folder. But how do we CD into a folder that we haven't made yet? Okay. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to use a $ and open parentheses, and that means that anything that goes in there, the shell is going to do first. And after it's done, it will then execute the CD. So the first thing that I want to do is I want to go ahead and use my make temp command to make a directory. And so in this way, this is a combination of two separate commands. The first one is I'm going to evaluate what's inside of these parentheses, and that's this mktemp command with a -D switch to make a directory. And then at that point, I'll have a directory, and I can just CD into it. So if I press that, notice that I'm immediately dropped into my temporary folder. I don't have to remember what it is. I don't have to type it in. I'm just in there. Okay, so that is a really good example of using one command to really do about 3 different things at the same time. So um, this is again an example of the power of using the Linux operating system because I can do that. Another thing that we can do is that we have the ability to use multiple inputs in a particular command. So what I want to do here is I'm going to go ahead and make a directory, and I'm going to use the -P switch. And if you want to see what that means, I'm going to go ahead and look at the help. And the help takes the good part of the manual, which are the switches, and it shows me just the switches. And notice that -P option means parents. There's no error if the folder exists. If it doesn't, go ahead and make parent directories as needed. Okay, so that means that if I had a directory that I wanted to make underneath a parent one, I would go ahead and create that. So if I just wanted to list the files that are in this folder, there are none, right? So I get no output there. But I'm going to use the mkdir command with the parent switch. And I'm just going to go ahead and make a couple of directories and build them kind of deep. So I'm going to make a pseudo file system. Okay, and then I'm going to make let's see, I don't want to use the slash. The reason why I don't want to use that slash is because I don't want to attach this directory that I'm making to the root folder. I want to attach it to the current folder that I'm in. So again, this is a pseudo file system. It's not a real one, but I'm going to go ahead and put some folders in here as if it were. So remember everything that we have in a standard file system kind of looks like this. And when I use that mkdir command, I did all that in one because it allows multiple parameters separated by spaces. And in that one command, notice that I have made a hierarchical file system that kind of mimics what we see in a regular Linux file system. So just given that one command, it went ahead and made multiple folders. And I forgot one. I'm gonna make a library folder. So now I have all the things I would expect in a file system. I have the bin, the device folder, the ITSC folder, home folder, user folder, documents folder, library folder, system binary file, and then a place for user installed programs. And another one that I might have in that is, again, I need to resist the urge to use that / so that I'm not attaching my folder to the root. Yeah, just made it a little more complicated. And so I have a nice little file structure I can work with and do some demos and demonstrations and to play with. Because a lot of times what you want to do in our logbooks and other things is you want to play with the commands. And you want to actually play with it as if you were doing it in real life. Maybe you want to use a touch command to create a whole bunch of files in a lot of different places. Maybe you want to use the copy command um, to put some output in many different places at the same time. So that's kind of what we're doing here with this. We're experimenting with the file system and playing with the commands. So and what I'll show you is some things that we can do that's special in Linux. We used to not be able to do some of these things in Windows, and since Linux is 30 years old now, there are things that can be done in the file system that we couldn't always do, but it comes from this. And so one of that is the idea of streams. So I'm going to show you really quickly how we go about creating what we call a stream. And if I and you can see this in the logbook entry, but obviously I could take this when I use this tree command. What I'm doing is I'm generating some output on the screen, and I could always send that output to a file as input. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to take that tree output, and I'm going to go ahead and send it all of the output from the tree program into the cat command, and I'm going to send that output from the cat command directly into a new file that doesn't exist yet, called home ddarden doc tree list dot text. And so what I should have at that point is a file called treelist.txt, and I can actually look at it. I can look at it here. And what I see there is the actual output of the tree command, and it's just there in text-based format. So what I did there was I took that special character called pipe, and that pipe will take the output of any command and pass it over to the input of the next command. So that brings us into this idea of what is output and what is input. So every file has every program that you run has three different designators to it. One is standard input, one is standard output, and one is standard error, and they're numbered 0, 1, and 2. So all of those things, and the way to remember that is to memorize it. Standard output, standard input, standard output, standard error. Input, output, error. And every program has that. So we will continue showing more about the shell in the next video.